Welcome and thank you for being here. For those returning to the Chamber of Solutions format, welcome back. For those that are new, welcome. Our specialist topic this week is Fresh Outlook Future Prospects. It's part of the Portsmouth Business Week. It's a conversation and it's about looking forward, about positivity, creativity, new perspectives and ideas as we emerge from the dark shadow of COVID. It's a partnership between Hampshire Chamber of Commerce, Portsmouth City Council, Shaping Portsmouth, University of Portsmouth, Solent Lep, and Mission Performance. We've got a very talented panel representing three different scales and size of businesses to inform the discussions that we have this morning. Before we get into the meat of the session, I'm sure you're all very familiar with Zoom. We're just going to point out a few things, housekeeping-wise. You'll need your participant icon clicked as well as the chat icon clicked. The chat function will be the main way that we will communicate in terms of questions. We'll invite you to address your questions to the panel. It's a place where we can put resources and links and PDFs and any other information to support your experience this morning. So the chat function is very important, as is the participant function as well. Just to test that, just put a couple of maybe one outcome that you hope to glean from today's session, just to let us know that you can use the chat function and that you are totally au fait with it. So just put an outcome that you expect from today's session in the chat function. We can take a look at those. Go ahead and do that now. That would be great. So one outcome for this morning's session. Yeah, thank you, Joe. How Portsmouth see themselves compared to Southampton. Ideas to take forward into planning. Yeah, great. We're all au fait with the chat function. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Ross McNally, CEO and Executive Chair of Hampshire Chamber of Commerce. Ross, over to you to open the session.
Thanks very much, Rob. Welcome, everybody. Great to see so many of us today. This is an event as part of the Portsmouth Business Week. We have events throughout the whole of the week, 17 or 18, built by and delivered to you by our partnership across Portsmouth Business Strategy Group. And I see that Pat, the Deputy Chair of the group, is here today. We've been spending some time over the past year and a half thinking about what Portsmouth Business Week would look like. It is a virtual series of events, and if you'd asked us 18 months ago whether that was going to be the case, I'm sure we would have been slightly more optimistic. But it is interesting that it's this week, in fact yesterday, that the Prime Minister has, I suppose, fired the gun for the reopening of the economy fairly fully, living with COVID, something which we always knew we would have to do, but it does set some new challenges for business. We've been challenged quite a lot over the past 18 months, and certainly we've learned an awful lot of new phrases along the way. I won't do a lot of business speak bingo with you, but you will have seen phraseologies such as collaborative development and pivoting your markets, streamlining your processes and strategic reviews and horizon scanning and refinancing for growth and all of those things. And I'm sure you've all been heavily involved in a number of those. But really, as we open up the economy, what does all of that mean for our business? Because we've been to an extent in survival mode. We've been very entrepreneurial in that sense. And I know a lot of businesses have, I wouldn't say done well, but they have been excellent in the way they have managed to survive and prosper. And so it really is about future prospects, as the title of the event says. But what does it mean for your business? Well, there's no better way to find that out than to understand the experiences of some leading businesses across Portsmouth and District. And that's exactly what we've got for you today. You will understand and identify with many of the challenges and the approaches and the solutions that are being put into place. But more importantly, this is an opportunity for you to ask your questions, for you to be part of this dialogue, to be part of this discussion. So please, cameras on, questions are into chat, and Rob will ensure that you're asked to present that question to the panel. We want this to be as interactive as possible, because this is about Portsmouth, and this is about how we set our course for the future, how we are going to ensure that the entrepreneurial values of Portsmouth retain and regain their preeminence as we move into this opened market. I do also, as Robert says, just want to make a couple of thanks. Firstly, it is to Portsmouth Business Strategy Group, a group of stakeholders and businesses that work with the Chamber of Commerce to ensure that the programming we bring to you as businesses across Portsmouth are really relevant to your needs. And so thank you to all of those hardworking volunteers led by Aaron Butson and by Pat Smith, who really do work hard to ensure that this programming is effective. And finally, I want to thank Mission Performance. For the past year and a half and looking to the future, we've been working with Mission Performance on these Chamber of Solutions events. These are your events, it's your community of practice, it's your sharing. So please get engaged, get involved, and welcome. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Ross. Let's turn to some introductions. My name's Rob Lewis. I'm one of the directors of Mission Performance Limited. We exist as a business to improve the standards of leadership, teamwork, and communication for the wider societal and environmental good. We do that by initiating and supporting long-term behavior change through high-quality training and coaching interventions. Pleasure and honor to be here with you this morning supporting Portsmouth. Let's turn more importantly to our panel. This panel we've assembled this morning covers the large to the small to the entrepreneurial business. Each has their own perspective to share with you. Without further ado, I have the pleasure in introducing Andrew Cullen, the CEO of Portsmouth Football Club. Andrew, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for the introduction, and good morning to everybody. The first time I've really had an opportunity to meet everybody. I've been in Portsmouth now for just 3 weeks since I arrived here. I thought it'd be helpful to give a bit of background to my career so far before addressing some of the key themes. But before I do that, I just wanted to say how delighted and privileged I am to come here as CEO of what is a fantastic football club with a proud history of over 100 years. I've watched the club from afar, both as a football fan and then obviously working in the business over the last 24 years. I've seen the trials, I've witnessed the tribulations and the rebirth of the football club, and it absolutely amazed how the supporters came together a few years ago to save a great football club which was literally on the brink of going out of existence, and of course from there having a new horizon, new opportunities with new owners coming in to invest in the club and to take it forward. I'm following on from a great CEO. I've known Mark Catlin for a number of years. One of Mark's strengths has been the way that he has been able to communicate, not just with supporters, but with the business community, and of course with other key stakeholders in the city, to keep those channels of communication open and keep the club as a vibrant entity within the Portsmouth community. And that's something that I really want to try and follow on from, and make sure that all that good work that Mark's put into those communications and accessibility absolutely continues. So I'm really looking forward to the role. I'm looking forward to working with the business community as well. I think a football club has a real ability to represent the community where it comes from, to the betterment of everybody who is from the community, whether it's whether it's profiling the city, and most importantly the businesses that are part of it. So understanding how we can do that, how we can take that forward, how we can shape that. It's been a big part of what I've done at my previous 2 clubs, which I'll come on to in a minute. But very much a key part of what we need to do for Portsmouth as well. So my background is I've probably lived the dream of every student and every graduate, in that I've worked for a brewery and I've worked in football. So I've had I started back in the 80s working for Bass, the brewers. as a student, as a graduate trainee, I went straight in to manage a pub for 12 months. It was an R&D pub, which had the very first EPOS systems in pubs back in 1983. We trialed different systems over 5 to 6 weeks. Then we had a new EPOS system coming in. And then we tried all sorts of new draft technical dispense equipment to serve beer, tried new products. I think we were, we put in draft milk, which didn't have a very long shelf life, either in terms of it actually staying in the pipes. And actually, I think that was a 5-6 week experiment. We had the first video jukeboxes in the United Kingdom. And these were 3 R&D pubs that we had in Burton-on-Trent, in Birmingham, and in Wolverhampton. So they were. It was a great experience because, as well as running all the new innovative ideas, everybody just wanted to throw and see whether they worked. You actually had to run a business at the same time. You still had customers coming into your pubs. But it was a great experience. I then went into sales after that initial period and sort of cut my teeth in selling into working men's clubs around Wolverhampton and the Black Country, which was a time of complete economic stress because all the foundries in that part of the world, were closing down, and the working men's clubs were absolutely rammed every lunchtime. So it was again a really positive experience in that way, in terms of sort of cutting your teeth and getting to understand how important the community is to a business, and the relationship between the breweries, the clubs, the people who use them were absolutely immense. I then went into marketing, and that is my background really. I worked on big brands such as Carling Lager for a period, the biggest selling beer brand in the UK at that time. I worked on some regional ale brands. I worked on Draft Bass, and then in 1990, when the beer merger, Monopolies and Mergers Commission came in and integrated or disallowed breweries to both have pubs and wholesale beer and produce beer, there was limits put on it. I went into the newly formed retail estate and became advertising and promotions manager for the whole Bass estate, from Aberdeen in Scotland down to Jersey in the Channel Islands, and from Swansea across to Norwich. So it was, again, that was looking after an estate of 2,500 pubs, providing all the promotional material, going through a big segmentation process. I then got to work on a couple of R&D projects, some which weren't very good and no longer exist, but a couple which are still very famous in terms of All Bar One estate, which we kicked off with 3 pubs in Birmingham, and then moving into places like O'Neill's as well. So again, I then moved into an advertising agency, had 3 years there. And in 1997, I got the opportunity to move to Norwich City Football Club as sales and marketing director. I had a spell of 11 years there working with Delia Smith and her husband, Michael Wynne-Jones, who are fabulous people. And then in 2008, got the opportunity to move to MK Dons at a time when Delia was technically selling up Norwich City, which unfortunately didn't happen. But under stress at the time, she felt that was the right thing to do. It never happened, but in the meantime, I'd made a decision to go to a brand new football club with a emerging hotel and arena operation, and spent the last 12 and a half years working in that environment in a brand new football club, which was really, really interesting, and sort of gives you a fresh outlook and a fresh approach. And then in April this year, I got approached by Mark, who told me he was going to be leaving the football club to work in another part of the Tornanty business. Tornanty, the owners of Portsmouth Football Club, and he was going to work for Topps, which is the trading cards company. And Mark had said, would I be interested in having a discussion with the owners, which I duly did. And 2 or 3 months later, I find myself here in Portsmouth with an incredible challenge, but a really, really exciting opportunity. So that's a little bit about me. I'm spending my first few weeks getting to know everybody in the business, understanding what people's roles and responsibilities are, where they feel there's some really big improvements that can be made, and then moving on into where I can sort of make a difference and making sure we've got the communications going right with all the different supporter groups, with the community, with the council, and with the MPs as well. So really, really exciting times to start to find my way through things, navigate through it, and of course, in the middle of it all, we've got a football club to make sure that we can hit the ground running in August, and going for a big change in philosophy and style, a new management team, a new academy manager. So it's a real fresh start here, and one that I'm thoroughly enjoying. In all that context, we're obviously coming out of the pandemic. We've got some big challenges going forward. We heard yesterday there's a real live possibility that we could have full stadia allowed in from the 7th of August when the season kicks off. That was probably something that's fair to say we weren't expecting. I think it was, we've been very cautiously optimistic that we might get to 25–50% of capacity. But it seems the direction of travel may be full for next year. So we've got some big challenges in terms of making sure we're up ready, and that people have the confidence to come and watch live football. And I think that's going to be a key thing. We've sold 12,500 flexi tickets, and we did that because we didn't know, we couldn't give people the promise and certainty that they would be able to come and watch football. So we've given them a right to buy a seat, but it seems all those 12,500 may well have the option to come to the first game of the season. And amongst that, we've got a stadium development works going on where people may have to move seats. So we've got some big things to think through. We've got to, how we sort of get staff in to man our catering and concession operations will be another big challenge over the next few weeks. We've got to, and I think the key to that's going to be how well we communicate over the next 4 to 5 weeks, so people understand, what is happening and what's going on, and that's been a feature, I think, of the last 16 months in terms of the football club here. It has had to reinvent itself in terms of, traditionally, we've had business partners, we've had sponsors who basically engage with the football club over on match days. So whether it be through advertising, whether it be through profile, whether it be through entertaining clients, through hospitality, that's been the traditional way that I think the club's operated. But during the pandemic, we had to switch much of that into digital communications, and actually leverage sponsor the sponsor collateral and the partner collateral in a different way. And one of the big things we had was the work of Portsmouth in the community, which really came to the forefront in terms of working with businesses and leading on the front foot to deliver several thousand food parcels right across the community to those that needed most, really showing how football can make a difference to people's life if channeled correctly. So that degree of connectivity was extremely important. From my own experience at Stadium MK, which is a building which was really badly affected because we had a 304 bedroom hotel within the stadium and a 3,500 square meter arena, which does exhibitions, events, sporting occasions, indoor sporting occasions throughout the year. And that really underlines and underpins the football operation. So the football operation loses money at MK Dons, but it's all worked by in terms of a sustainable business model, which comes from the hotel and comes from the arena. And those events were potentially gone. No hotels open, no events, no exhibitions. But we found a way through it. And one of the things we did was we linked up with Matchroom, which is, for those of you who know your sport, Matchroom is a business owned by Barry Hearn. And Barry and his team decided that one way out of them, if you like, to get the troops excited, was to make sure we could return live sport to the television as early as possible. And the way we did that was they looked at our business which had a stadium, which had an arena and had a hotel, and decided that secure bubbles could be created. So throughout May, we worked with the council in Milton Keynes, we worked with government, DCMS, and we worked with Barry to create a secure bubble where darts and snooker could actually be shown live on TV. So the end result, to cut a long story short, was 38 events between June the 5th last year and the end of April this year, which were, I think 28 of them were snooker events, and we were holding things in Milton Keynes such as the German Masters, the Gibraltar Open, the Scottish Masters, all came to Milton Keynes. And the way we were able to do that was the competitors could come into the hotel, be tested. If they received a negative test, they could, within 48 hours, they were able to compete in the tournament. They went to their hotel bedrooms. In the very early days, they were locked up basically within the hotel, and then they had to, and then they went into the arena, played their matches, and stayed for the duration of the tournament. And then once they were knocked out, they could then return home and return 4 days later for the next tournament on the tour. So the whole tour was kept in Milton Keynes. And the interesting thing was, in the early days, we actually had to lock up all the staff as well, because they couldn't leave the hotel in June, July. If you came into the bubble, you couldn't exit the bubble. So we asked for volunteers, and we were a bit apprehensive, but we ended up with a whole host of staff putting their hands up in the air and said, yeah, I want to come and be locked up at work for 2 weeks. I just want to get out. And particularly the youngsters all came in. So we were able to service the hotel bedrooms. We were able to service the kitchens and all the catering requirements, the stewarding, everything else that was needed to make this a safe and secure environment. And we ended up with about 120 bedrooms every week being sold, which gave us about a 30% occupancy, or 30 to 40% occupancy. And we had a lifeline that kept us going throughout the pandemic. And going forward for Stadium MK, it means a number of those events, perhaps not the Gibraltar Open or the German Masters, but a number of those events will stay at Stadium MK, within Arena MK, the Marshall Arena, for many years to come. And we found that we had staff with so many transferable skills, which are going to be absolutely vital, and providing new opportunities for people and understanding our business a little bit better at Stadium MK. So that was really, really key. I think both football clubs, Portsmouth and MK Dons, found a new way of engaging with supporters. What was important, that if we were to maintain football, to maintain that connection with fans, that we had to have real connectivity throughout the pandemic. And we worked in many, many different ways, through phone-ins, on the radio, through forums. At MK Dons, I went stand by stand and had 150 people on a Zoom call every week, so that they felt involved. They could ask questions of the manager, they could ask questions of a player, they could ask questions of me. And I think that was really, really key to making sure that people continue to feel loved and respected and in touch with their football club, which was so important to them during the pandemic. We also found a new way that we could get people to virtually attend our games. So working with the EFL, we were able to sell the iFollow product, which had been established 2 years prior by the EFL, which meant we could live stream games to fans. And at Portsmouth, it was fantastic. I think 113,000 passes, matchday passes, were sold throughout the season. There was an average viewing figure of over 4,000, which I think was the second, third best in League One. Ipswich and Sunderland and Portsmouth were sort of away. We were able to do pre-match programs, again, to keep people connected. And again, I think that was hugely important in maintaining season ticket, in terms of not having to give refunds back to people. So the generosity of supporters really, really shone through, and people not claiming those refunds that they were entitled to, but we were able to give them something back in terms of the iFollow product, which they were able to watch both home and away games. And again, that's given us a really, really strong start ahead of when we can come back and work with, back to normal circumstances of people being able to watch live sport. And finally, I think for me, the other thing that it's really got us thinking about is how do we improve this digital experience? Because we've used Zoom, we've used Teams, we've used iFollow, we've had this connectivity with fans during the period, but how can we leverage that to the benefit of businesses as well? So we were able to, during the pandemic, as I said, change some of the collateral into a digital way. But again, we've got to think very, very brightly, make sure that we've got a forum for idea generation. We're looking at the stadium. How do we make the stadium Wi-Fi connected? Because as most of you know, when you go to a big venue, it's very, very difficult to get a Wi-Fi signal because your broadband drops out after if there's 2,000 or 3,000 people in the stadium. If there's 16,000 people, can we get to a situation? And 5G is going to create an opportunity there. We're already looking at it at Milton Keynes as a 5G hub. And that there's work going on there. So looking at that as to how that can work for Portsmouth as well. So again, that provides us a way to interact with people on their phones during the match as well, which can be of both content driven and exciting, but can also provide some commercial opportunities. And I think the pandemic's going to force that to become, accelerate the progress there in terms of what we want to do. So we look very hard at that. We want to use the experience and the way that we better connected with supporters and businesses to make sure that we continue to develop that. And most of all, in the way that where Portsmouth in the community, our charity scheme has led the way, that we can all play a part as we come out of the pandemic and building on that and rebuilding the community. What's most important, I think, as a football club is that you can use the power of football to make a difference to people's lives. And we have a wonderful opportunity to do that as we come out of the pandemic. And perhaps to meet the mantra that I try to use at all my football clubs is that, both at Norwich and MK, and I think it's as critically important at Portsmouth, is to have a football club that's really, really proud of its community and a community that's proud of its football club. And that's the way that, we'll try and shape things forward as we come out of the pandemic.
Andrew, thank you very much. That's an incredibly superb background and covers so many subjects that we'd like to get into the detail of in a second. Before we do that, I'd like to invite Craig to please provide an introduction. Over to you, Craig.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I was just reflecting, listening to some of the history of the football clubs there about my history in Portsmouth, and actually I came to the city almost 20 years ago as a mature student to Portsmouth University, met my wife there. And although through the years I've worked for various tech companies in the area and lived in various different countries, we've always found ourselves coming back to Portsmouth. And when my co-founders and I were setting up this business, although there was a draw or a pull from places like Shoreditch in London and Brighton to go and set up a tech company, it was actually felt quite natural for us to use the network that we developed here, the connections we have with the university to set up our business. And I think Portsmouth is a great place for tech and innovation. It has a different vibe from London and Brighton, but I think it certainly fits us and the culture of our company much better. So my company is Skore, spelt with a K, S-K-O-R-E. I'm the CEO of the company, and although the company has been technically around since 2014, we've been commercially active since the beginning of 2017. We're a software development company. We create a product which is a business process improvement software. So business process improvement is one of those tool sets that's been used by predominantly larger enterprises for many, many years. And it's all about making businesses more resilient, more agile. And it does that through helping those businesses identify inefficiencies. It's about bringing clarity to teams. It's about improving quality, reducing risk. But ultimately, it's about improving customer and employee experience. And what our focus at SCORE is all about taking those tool sets and simplifying them so that we can make them much more accessible to more people. And although we sell our product to businesses of all sizes, predominantly it's SMEs that use our product, because we're essentially giving those tools that have been only accessible to the largest enterprises, making those easy enough and intuitive enough to use by smaller businesses. And of course, through the last 18 months, that's given us a brilliant view into a wide variety of businesses. If you go back to what I said before about process improvement, it's all about building resilience in your business and building agility to be able to weather storms that come along. And as we entered the pandemic, we really saw quite a stark difference in those businesses that we work with. And those that had a more innovative, more entrepreneurial type foundation, we really saw how they took the beginning of the pandemic as a brilliant opportunity to step back, take a deep breath, and then use that space to really explore and try new things. Now, I think most businesses certainly did some quite rapid changes, some quite innovative changes. A lot of organizations adopted digital technologies much faster than they perhaps ever did before. But one of the things that we've been looking at recently is how what is it that happened at that beginning of the pandemic? And if you think about how quickly we went almost overnight from working in the office to working at home, how quickly businesses went within days and weeks from having no online or e-commerce offering to selling their services online, selling products online, and even in many cases delivering services online. And I'm thinking about many consulting and training companies that completely shifted to an online model where they may have not thought that was possible before. That all happened in a very, very short space of time. And so reflecting on why that happened and what can we learn from that into the future? Some of the things that we've found is that if you think about how an organization changes, so if you're thinking about implementing maybe a new system or a new service that you want to set up, you'll probably be familiar with the various pain that might cause in the business, how long it takes, how do we get our staff, our team, our customers, our suppliers to all align around the same needs that the business have. And when we look at the early stages of the pandemic, what we saw actually was this very sharp alignment in the needs of both the businesses, the employees, and the customers and suppliers of those business. And what you had was this need for the business to survive. At the same time, you had the individual needs around a health emergency, and those things all perfectly aligned to allow or provide an incredible amount of focus and allow things to happen very, very quickly, to very rapidly test and deploy new and innovative ideas that just weeks before, if you discussed them within your team, you might have said, well, that's going to take months or years to implement. And so I think the really important thing for me for businesses moving forward to think about is it's that idea of what are the various and competing needs of both the business, the people in your teams, and your customers or prospective customers, as well as wider societal needs as well. And the closer you can get those things to align, the better chance you are to have of really implementing new innovative ideas and making them a success.
Great. Thank you, Craig. Superb. Let's move to Brett.
Good morning, everybody. Great to be here. Brett Lloyd-Payne from Anstero. It's great for me to be able to represent the potentially the smaller business, of which there are many in Portsmouth. I've been attending Chamber of Commerce sessions for really throughout the whole 7 years that Ansturo's been up and running. I actually provide interim management services to medium to large corporations and businesses spread across the UK and Europe. Many of them have had offices in the Portsmouth region. Often their HQs are in different parts of the UK, but I'm lucky enough to have been able to work in normal times in many countries around Europe and around the world, on behalf of an organisation that is often UK based. The type of service that I provide is programme management. It involves me going into an organisation which is at the wrong end of the type of service that Craig and SCORE are actually providing, where they've gone ahead with a large transformation programme. They've had a view that they can deal with it themselves, and actually they've stumbled along the way because they haven't been following best practice. They haven't been looking at their processes, etc. But they've got a burning platform. So for example, I'm working with an organization at the moment that has got a very hard making tax digital requirement for April next year, and that needs them to have Dynamics 365 finance and operations put into their very large business across the UK, the Americas, Australia and New Zealand. So the pandemic situation that we've seen over the last 18 months has obviously had a big effect on my customers and the way they do business. It's had a big challenge in the way that they've had to continue delivering their transformation programs. And that has allowed me to continue to work with them, but have to work in a very different way. So I seem to have multiple video systems on my work computers. So I have Zoom, I have Teams, I have Skype, the list goes on. And you have to be flexible to be able to meet those different requirements of all those different organizations and do things in a different way. And it certainly is a lot harder if, for example, an organization has 163 people they have to deliver a particular system to, whereas before they would have been classroom-based training and education sessions, topped up with some Zoom sessions, and now, of course, everything's on Zoom. Not to mention the challenges that they face just working together to complete a project and deliver to the milestones and the go live dates, etc., when everybody is remote. That certainly has been difficult for people. They are starting to see a route out, but it is very different in all the different countries that I have my clients in. So for example, in Morocco at the moment, it's still very staying away from the office, dealing with people in masks when they do one-to-one meetings, etc. And that generates a whole load of opportunity. So it's great to be here. And if there's anything that I can support you on in regards to the view of a smaller business, I'm very happy to do so.
Thank you, Brett. There's a lot to cover here, lots of ground. I want to get specific now and trying to dive into a little bit more depth in some of the concepts and the experience that you shared with us, panel. One of them I'm intrigued about, being a self-appointed football fan. I think that the culture of a football club, by its very nature, has to engage with a variety of different stakeholders. Never more are there more engaged supporters than your supporters. Avid, emotional, engaged in every respect. So against that and linked to sort of stakeholder capitalism, which is a bit of a in vogue at the moment, how you reach out to different stakeholders in your business. I think, Andrew, we had a question that came from our guests about how modern football clubs engage with such a vast array of stakeholders, and how do you go about identifying and meeting their needs and collaborating with them? Would you like to share some of your experience on that particular subject.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I mean, when I started at Norwich in '98, the club had gone through a huge reputational crisis. In 1992, it had finished third in the inaugural Premier League, qualified for Europe, and gone on and in its first European season to defeat Bayern Munich in the Olympic Stadium and win the tie, and progressed in the competition before going out to two Dennis Bergkamp goals across two legs against Inter Milan. And those were pretty heady days. But 3 years later, the club lived beyond its means and was relegated from the Premier League to the league below, and very quickly began a fire sale of players, which left the fans disillusioned and ultimately led to demonstrations, police horses on the street, fans in confrontation with each other, and ultimately protests against the owner, which led to the owner not in a great place and had lost everything in terms of his stakeholders, both supporters, the city, the businesses, and led to him selling the club to the old president, who was in his 80s. And then that led to new people coming in 1996, who invested each, I think, about £500,000 each, 5 of them, just to pay the bills and keep the club afloat. And in 97, end of 97, this is when I came to the club along with another guy called Neil Doncaster as a company solicitor. Neil now runs the Scottish Premier League. And I came in, so it's people outside of football, just to try and reinvent the football club as a modern, forward-looking, supporter-focused, customer-focused organisation, transforming it from the cottage industry that it was. And we both came with experience, obviously, in our own ways of working outside of football. And that was incredibly important, because what that also led to at the same time, what that board did prior to my arrival, was look at ways they could re-engage with the stakeholders. And they set up a number of different forums, a number of working groups. And the whole idea really was to involve supporters and stakeholders in decisions that affected them most at football clubs. And when you fast forward to the Portsmouth situation, you find something broadly similar in terms of even more sort of radical in terms of supporters actually stepping up to actually save the football club and being involved in owning it and then trying to take it forward as far as they can. But of course, if you're a supporter and you're a director and owner of a football club, it does come with lots of different issues. It comes with the problem of trying to pay the bills. Football is a very cash hungry business that requires large sums of investment to enable you to be competitive on the pitch. No more so than in the league above us at the moment, the Championship, more so than Premiership, more so than League One. And to take the football club forward, you have to look at where those sources of extra revenue, investment, equity can actually come from. The second problem you would have as well is your fiduciary duties as well. As a supporter, do you really want to put your life on the line in terms of all the things that you have to do to remain solvent in a way where you may not necessarily have that level of resource and income to be able to do that? So it's a neat idea, but it comes with particular challenges, which is obviously where the Eisners came in 4 years ago and outlined their vision, and the supporters deciding at that point that the best step forward to the football club was to go back to also to sell the club and help take it forward. But what's really critical is that the club never loses sight of the relationship it has with its different supporters. And in my first 2 weeks, I've had 5 separate meetings with different supporter organisations, the presidents and then the Supporters Trust, who between them were responsible for taking their club forward for those very, very difficult days. There's a Pompey Independent Supporters Association, which I'm meeting tonight. There is the Tony Goodall Fans Conference, which is a meeting I attended last Thursday, which is all the different fans groups actually coming together. I've got a number of meetings coming up with the different supporter groups from which are more far-flung, from Scotland to the Isle of Wight to Chichester to London. So all of those groups are really, really important to develop a dialogue and a relationship with. And whilst in the first few weeks, for me, it's been very much one way, them asking me questions, trying to find out what my ideas are, what my vision is, where I want to take the football club, my background. It's important we make it two-way, and that they can actually have the ability to actually, you know, share their thoughts and be involved in the matters such as pricing, such as the stadium experience, such as the future direction of the football club, heritage and identity. So all those things are really, really critical, and a way that your stakeholders need to have that link through the CEO, through to the board, to make sure there is a meaningful dialogue.
Andrew, so it's a combination of almost a premeditated identification of those stakeholders, and then going down and building a very collaborative relationship with each of them. They feel that they have a voice and some power in influencing the strategy of the club, which they love.
Yeah, and I think it's important to harness that as well, to make sure that it is those decisions that really do affect them most, the ones that they're going to engage in, you know, in terms of how does, you know, what the facilities within the stadium, the pricing, away travel, you know, all those sorts of things. Occasionally you'll go to a ground and there's not sufficient seats to sit the people who want to travel to that particular ground. So, you know, rather than, you know, the executive coming up with a one-size-fits-all solution, you know, involve people in those discussions so that you get a much better decision, a much more engaged decision, and more collaboration coming through and what you're making. You'll make better decisions as a consequence. Coming back to Stadia is another big way that you need to involve your supporters in. There may be slightly different rules, there may be slightly different regulations, there may be processes and procedures that will be different, but involve them in that, so again, you make a better decision.
No, I totally get that, Andrew. Having the courage to reach out and to be totally open with them. It's a shared challenge and opportunity that we need to solve, and together rather than independently. Totally collaborative working at its best. Craig, you mentioned points around the pandemic, the entrepreneurial mindset. What was it about the pandemic then that we can replicate post-pandemic that will keep us fitter in terms of remaining open to new ideas and new ways of doing things?
Well, I think one of the things that I think is going to be hard to replicate to start with is, of course, right at the beginning of the pandemic, because as many like myself, many other business leaders, there was a necessity to survive, you know, and almost we've got to do whatever it takes attitude, which, you know, again, as I was saying before, meant that you were much more prepared to take a gamble on things that you might have been a bit more conservative on previously. So I think that that's hard to replicate. But going back again to what I said about this, really understanding the needs of the different stakeholders and making sure they are aligned will certainly create a fertile ground for trying out new ideas. I think that there were some really interesting stories. I mean, early on in the pandemic, I spent quite a bit of time phoning around our customers and partners, and just to sort of reach out, see how they were getting on, see how they were feeling, share some of my stresses with them, as well as hear about what they were going through. And to see how we could help each other through it. Because again, I'm sure most of you, if you haven't tried to block it from your mind, will remember at the beginning, even if you had some sort of business which would technically survive in an environment where where we all had to work at home, for example, so, you know, an e-commerce type system, the economy was closing down very, very rapidly, and we didn't know whether there was still going to be money moving around for people to buy things. So no one really knew right at the beginning what was going to happen. And one of the companies we were working with was a stone merchant, and they sell a lot of gravel. And right at the beginning, or just before the pandemic, they'd started to invest in online advertising. Now, when the pandemic hit, a lot of their bigger competitors, so, you know, the companies like B&Q and Wix and some of the builders merchants were actually spending less on online advertising because, again, like everyone else, they didn't know what's happening. These guys decided to plow on and spend more. And within a matter of weeks, of course, what happened is a lot of us were sat at home going, right, now I'm going to do that garden project, or I'm going to change something. Their sales went through the roof, and it was all driven by this traffic of people sort of suddenly sat at home. And so there were situations like that where it was a bit of chance. They'd obviously invested the time beforehand, but just other circumstances put them in a really strong position. And then I can contrast that with another one of our customers that I was talking to, who's telling me a story about his next door neighbor who ran a shop in central London selling hair extensions. And within a couple of weeks into the pandemic, they were having a talk over the garden fence, and she was going, "That's it, I'm going to shut the shop down, I'm giving up." And he's like, whoa, what? But surely people still want your product. And she goes, "Yeah, but I've got no way of getting them to them because I can't go to the shop. People aren't allowed to come in." And he said, let's sit down and talk about how you could still reach your customers. And so, and the way he described it to me is, he said we've got on a Zoom call, even though we were next door to each other, sat in the virtual kitchen and sketched out, how would an e-commerce platform work? How could we set up a website? And so what you had is almost that sort of entrepreneurial thinking in terms of, I have a business and I want to do something with it, but also some more structural type thinking. And that's what he brought to that party. So it's about, a lot of this is about thinking about what are the different skill sets you need to make something happen.
Yes.
And bring them together.
They're very clear. It's a sort of combination of sort of divergent combined with sort of convergent thinking in a way that brings those ideas to fruition. And I suppose the other point is about complacency, isn't it? Perhaps trying to avoid complacency and staying a little bit more honest and sharper to the available opportunities that present themselves to us.
Exactly. I mean, that space that many of us had suddenly when things got very quiet. One option we could have taken was to just sort of shut everything down for a few months and see what happens. Mm-hmm. But again, like our gravel merchant friends, we decided to double down on what we knew we were good at, and that's paid off for us. Great.
Well, I'm going to come to Brett in a second. And we've had a couple of questions in around hybrid working and the return of remote workers back into the workplace or not, and how that may affect or not HR policies and everything that surrounds that. I think it links back to Andrew's point around engaging your employees as a key stakeholder in how you manage that transition. So I'm really curious to find out, Brett, what are your views on that? What experience have you got from some of your clients on that question?
Yeah, so all of my projects very quickly went to video software. Different people are using different things. A big consideration, especially when you're dealing with clients that are based in other countries, is actually their bandwidth, especially people working at home. Spain has been a real challenge where they're constantly having to knock off their video, etc., because the broadband that we would all expect in Portsmouth certainly does not exist in many of these other countries, which can be a little bit of a challenge. Being flexible in the system that you're using, and I've got to say, spending one-to-one time on calls with people to build that relationship. Normally in any business, when you walk into an office, you get an opportunity to spend some time with people in their individual offices or at the cafeteria or at the coffee machine, etc. You don't get that when you're working remotely. So therefore you have to make time. You have to make time around their schedule. So if that means it's at the end of the day, you do it at the end of the day. And to do your best to build that relationship. And in my experience, getting people to turn their camera on. I mean, even on this call here, there's an awful lot of people that don't have their cameras on. In day-to-day business, I find that as well. And it can be very difficult building a relationship with people when you're just seeing their first name and surname. Yeah. So a big encouragement to people, in my personal experience, I do find that trying to bring some humor into it, changing video backgrounds, some of them professional, some of them more humorous. I mean, yesterday when we had a little run through for this call, I had the England flags going in the background and everything. If there's things there, you can generate conversations which are slightly away from the business perspective. That helps build the relationship and helps get things done in a situation which would be normally a lot easier when you're doing it face to face.
Yes, thank you, Brett. I think that the remote and virtual working will always be with us. I think, Pat, you had this question. Feel free to address it to the panel. The fundamental shift in the relationship between employees and employers, that contract, the emotional contract, as well as a sort of more commercial one, expectations about them returning to work. I think that's changed the nature of that relationship probably forever. I've got friends and colleagues that have totally moved to a hybrid way of working. They've given up their offices and everyone's working from home. And in fact, one of our clients is now providing desks and machines and a budget for all global employees to work from home at least 3 days a week. And every company is different. Pat, would you like to address your question to the panel?
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. So, working at the University of Portsmouth, I don't directly link with students. My role is very much engaging with the businesses and then taking that in and explaining what your current thinking is to the academics, and they can filter that through to the students. But what should we be telling students that are just starting their degrees as to what's the world of work going to look like for them when they leave in 2 to 3 years' time? Because already we've seen a massive change. They've had to adapt to online learning, not having face-to-face. And hopefully we're going to go towards that. Will they be expected to be working far more flexibly? And is that going to have an impact on recruitment? Is there going to be greater competition because you can hire somebody that's living in Newcastle? You're not necessarily going to hire locally. So what is the impact going to be for Portsmouth on local people?
That's a very good question, Pat. I think that with Andrew, your experience of working with BAS through to all the different organizations that you've worked with over the years, if you were the Andrew Cullen aged 18 in 2021, what advice would you give to that 21-year-old Andrew Cullen in terms of context of Pat's question?
I think it's going to ultimately come down to the type of business that you're working in. Clearly, we've all experienced working from home over the early stages of the pandemic, and some still are doing that. I think the things that have come out of that experience, first of all, have been the ability to improve greater trust with your employees. I think, there was a lot of cynicism as to, whether people would actually achieve what we were asking them to do working from home, particularly those that were not furloughed and were continuing to maintain the levels of the business. I think it also led to a greater focus and identification of what clear objectives were, what we expected of our colleagues and our employees. I think it led to greater collaboration. For example, at Stadium MK, we ended up having a senior management leadership team every day at 12 o'clock, which we'd normally do once a week. But, with a fast-moving, fast-pacing business that we were, and the challenges that we were experiencing it was really, really critical that we did that, because there was something coming at us every day, a financial challenge, an operational challenge, a marketing challenge. So that was absolutely key to us as well. And I think from the employees' perspective, I think it encouraged them as well to make sure that they were on track and were far more focused in what they were delivering. And I'm sure that my experience was that productivity did increase in a way that I couldn't have possibly anticipated at the start of the pandemic from working from home. The business I work in is very, very much, customer facing, supporter facing. So, we're going to have clear contacts where people do have to, come into work and, work in shops, work in the box office, work in areas where we need to see each other. Players and coaches have got to come to work. Academy staff, physiotherapists, sports scientists, they're all coming in. So that is something which will continue. You can't do that remotely, or very difficult to do that remotely. Almost impossible to do it remotely, but it's I think it's going to come down to the level of business and people understanding really what they're going into, and each business I think is going to shape it. We're seeing obviously a lot of the finance companies going forward. One of the things to understand, I think you broached on it, Pat, is the HR policies as well. And one of the first policies I received here was to review the working from home policy, which is very, very good. And part of that policy that we want to see is that we manage to get people into the office a minimum percentage of time in each week, or certainly across the month. So there is that total engagement with colleagues and they're not missing out on anything. And that's how Portsmouth Football Club will operate going forward in those back office functions, as I call them, which could potentially work from home. There's a few of them, but we don't want that. We want people coming in. And I had to review that last week, particularly because we had some people who had to go into self-isolation because they'd been in close contact with a positive case. And that led me to review the procedures that we were working within the football club once again, and to re-look at working from home, making sure that we were maintaining the right social distancing measures that we're obliged to do. But I wanted to make sure that didn't lead back to a position where people felt disengaged again, particularly at a point where we're bringing everybody back closer together. And you can see the with a very, very young team of people that work here that, they want to be in the office, they want to be around colleagues, they want to learn. And that's going to be, I think it's going to be a challenge for some businesses because you're going to miss out on that. And what you pick up from your people around you, their experiences is absolutely vital. So I think we've got some challenges in that respect as to how we address those.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. A good question from Phil that's just come in. It shows the about the vaccines, and Ross, with a multiplicity of different points from making that transition to hybrid, and all the features of vaccine or not vaccinated, and the rights of people working with non-vaccinated people in various businesses. Is there a one-stop place where employers can go to navigate these different policies or get answers to some questions that they have?
If a business wants to find out an answer to any particular issue relating to that, all the issues around vaccination, apartheid, and 101 other of these terrible cliches that seem to pop up in every newspaper every now and then, is basically to utilize your networks, and those networks will utilize the sources of information they have through their stakeholders. So Chamber of Commerce actually is there to provide policy support to businesses. I'm just giving us as an example.
Yes.
Other business networks also apply, but there are ways in which we operate. We're in and out of number 10 and number 11 Downing Street, as is the FSB, as is the IOD and CBI and other groupings, and so we're there to help shape much of that protocol in terms of the way of operating. And we take it on the chin sometimes when for political reasons, government goes in one direction and business might be hoping to go in another direction. But that's the way. You don't win them all. But fundamentally, we do have, through my office and through the office of Lisa, the ability to find solutions to particular problems. So if for example, a business is saying, I really don't know the risks as we open up from the 19th of July as to working and for my staff and for my clients and my stakeholders, will basically get in touch with me or get in touch with Lisa, and we'll be 1 or 2 degrees of separation from finding some kind of support, some kind of advice and guidance around it. But it is many and varied, Rob.
Yes, thank you, Ross. It's almost like a clinic. You've got a particular ailment, we'll find the answer. We know somebody that's got the answer and we'll provide that for you. I think that's a really good way of putting it.
We find it as a challenge, Rob.
Yeah. Gregory, if you feel comfortable, you made a really good point in the chat. A great example of collaboration in action. If you're still with us, you can, if you feel comfortable, put your point to the floor and we can discuss it.
Well, thanks very much, Rob. Yeah, Gregory White from, I'll say the name of our company. We started 2 months, 4 months before the pandemic, December 2019. And it's about being yourself. It's about people being real. I was affected by mental health for over 3 decades. So I wanted a company in IT and media. I couldn't find one in the third sector to have an experience while I was doing a part-time master's. So I started one, and I don't know what it's become now, but it's grown. And I think the reason being is because the company's called Drop the Mask is a bit of a funny one just before a pandemic starts. And people are asking, Drop the Mask Productions and but starting an IT and media company, what I wanted was a community interest company because I wanted people to not be judged because of the mental health and especially my severe mental health. I wanted to give people the opportunities through the pandemic for at least us to find how we could help them. We were able to get a couple of grants that we were actually asked to go for. And during the pandemic, we've grown. We put everything into place, both to work in the office still and to work remotely, to put all cloud-based systems in right across our IT and media, where we could introduce, not Zoom we found very hard with interactions. So we put other technologies in. So with NHS, people with mental health, within the NHS could actually take a Zoom meeting and we could sit in another office, in a small room, and actually do all the behind the scenes stuff on a live Zoom chat with live logos, with artificial intelligence, speech to pick up subtitles from videos and everything, and make it really inclusive. And that's allowed us to be a not-for-profit and take away the pressures of being driven by money, driven by profit, and just to be driven by the service that we feel in the sector's needed. I'm only 18 months into a career in my 50s, and before I never really had anything, so I'm learning as I go.
Yeah.
Hampshire Chamber Conferences have been great. But sorry, I really rabbit on sometimes, but like we work in a limited hierarchical way. And that, I feel, takes a lot of pressure off of people, young people. And we've just taken on for IT and for media Kickstarters through DWP. And they're doing a video on Kickstarters for the DWP for England. And it's not because we're great or whatever. We say we're 80% perfect, and it takes the pressure off us and companies working with us that we're just going to try and do our best. And we feel that's really good for mental health, physical health. And what we've been able to do is employ people, and those 8 people, out of them, 7 are recognised as having problems or issues and never had a position or job or been seen capable of. And it's just the panel, it's just, what do they think about community interest companies if they had any experience, and about the collaborations that we have with them, and is it more of a way forwards for communities work and not in a less pressured way for employment?
Yes, Gregory, that's fantastic. Love the brand, by the way, Drop the Mask, superb. It sounds like, incredible efforts over the pandemic, and being a fellow Kickstarter fan of the Kickstarter scheme, I can certainly vouch for that scheme and all it does for us. Can
I just add one thing while Andrew's on that? One of my friends and one person on the board with us is an ex-Portsmouth player, and he's been great, a real influence to us, real quiet in the background as well. So it's really nice, to know that people from a profession as well, did a great bit for communities as well. So we're teaching them a new career in a way. So.
Yeah. Andrew, have you got any experience of community investment companies or organizations of a similar setup in your experience over the years?
Yeah, I think they've mainly been allied to the charities that we run within football clubs. So Pompey in the community here, the MK Dons Sport and Education Trust, and Norwich City Canary Community Foundation have some really good links, I think, with those sorts of businesses to bring in. So My own experience of working with them is a little bit sort of separated from that, but I can see the difference in the impact it brings in. And looking at Kickstart, I brought 3 ground staff into MK Dons back in the summer, and opportunities for 3 young people, 2 of whom are exceptional and will go on probably to become ground staff after their Kickstart ends here. We've also worked here at Portsmouth with somebody in our media team who has just come on the Kickstart scheme and is now going to be offered a full-time, or has been offered a full-time permanent position as well. So, you know, the Kickstart has, I think, been really, really valuable, just to go off piste on that one. So yeah, really, really important. And our partnerships with businesses are really, really critical, understanding the differences that they make to the community. And Pat's here from the university, and one of the key objectives from both the university and the football club with this partnership, our main title partner, is to create opportunities for, you know, for young people. You know, there's 25% of people in Portsmouth, you know, youngsters only go on to university, and the aspirations are particularly low in that respect. Whereas it would be something like, you know, 75%, I understand, in places like Chelsea or Hammersmith. So again, working with the university to create some scholarships and opportunities to go forward, to make people have the opportunity, young people to have the opportunity to realise their aspirations through this powerful partnership of the university and the football club, is really, really important to us. Yeah. And it really makes it more than just a sponsorship. It's a true partnership in the word, to enable people in the community to realise and, you know, have a better feeling for their aspirations going forward.
A real exchange of value and investing in future generations. Brett, what's your perspective on community investment companies? Any experience in your?
Actually, no, I haven't had any experience on that side at all. All of the clients that I've worked with, I don't think they have had anything involved in that side of things at all.
What about yourself, Greg? Any experience of TIC?
I certainly be interested in connecting with you, Gregory, after this session. I love what you're doing, and I love the message about taking the pressure off. You know, talking about saying, you know, we're 80%, I think is a brilliant idea. I mean, we've not worked specifically with a community interest company, but we have worked with charities. We try to support, we've worked with some of the local schools around us, and I personally have got an interest in this, in ESG, environmental, societal and governance, and thinking about how all organizations can really do more for, you know, it's not just about profit, but it's about how do we do more for the world around us. So I don't know a huge amount about community interest companies, but I'd certainly be keen to learn more. And as I said, I'd love to connect with you, Gregory, afterwards.
We have, sorry, who's that?
Apologies, it's me just saying thank you. Sorry, I come off the mic. Apologies.
No, thank you, Gregory. It's a great story, and I'd like to stay connected. There may be some work you could do with Andrew's organisation in terms of the support you give for, you know, reaching out to the community. Who knows? This is what these events are for, to connect people in that respect. I know there's a business mission performance. We've just achieved B Corporation status, which forces you to think about your triple bottom line beyond just the profit that you make. The B Corporation might be something you could look at, Gregory. You know, and get that, not that you need it, but validation on a global level that you are an organization that supports highest standards of transparency and in your business. So let's pick up a question that we had about skills and developing skills for young people. And the Kickstarter was one particular element. I don't know how many people on the call have, other than Andrew and ourselves, have considered the Kickstarter program, but there was a question about what skills and experience we can provide for young people. I think the Kickstarter scheme is one very good practical way of doing that. Apprenticeships is another option. Ross, I'm sure with your experience, there are lots of different services available to young people wanting to start out in their careers. Kickstarter just being one of them.
Absolutely. I mean, if you want to get involved in Kickstarter, I've put the link into the chat, and Hampshire Chamber is again one of the gateways, and currently we've placed over 200 young people are actually in post presently, and we've had upwards of 900, 1,000 business placements that are in the process of being filled in our partnership with DWP. So, you know, Kickstart's a marvelous scheme, and when you see the talent who, because of the unique situation we find ourselves in, unfortunately not able to easily have landed employment following education or following maybe redundancy from an organisation, that we are blessed in this particular community to be able to find good talent. I'd also give a quick mention to the Apprenticeship Hub as well, and I'll put the link into the piece there, which can really help you as a business to have a look and fathom out all of the complexities, and it is complex at times, of how to take on an apprentice. And the good thing about the apprenticeship is that it can follow on from Kickstart as well. So that's quite a seamless transition if you want to do it that way. But basically the other two routes and the best routes really for you know, early engagement is to get engaged with the FE colleges and get engaged with the university. The way that they can help you to be able to build opportunities to engage with young people who are undertaking their education, and then can look to placements with you and also look to future careers with you as well. So I would just say that there are probably four good shouts in terms of routes to make sure that you as a business and organization are well engaged. None of it is particularly, you know, original or new, but what they do have is all of the resources to be able to back you up as a business, and that's really what you need if you're a busy SME.
Thank you, Ross. Andrew, we had a question that we haven't answered yet. You know, you must get bombarded with ideas and creative suggestions every day of your working life. How do you choose which idea to run with?
I think it's important to have a really good framework. So you're quite right. Idea generation comes bombarding out a football club from all sorts of sources of things that you could potentially do. And to be quite frank, with the resource you have, you just can't take everybody on. So I think you know that there's a framework in place. You've got to have that to actually start to score things. You know, look at the strategic relevance to the business of the idea. Look at clearly what your objectives are. Is there a good fit? Have you got what the financial outcomes might be from that particular idea? And to really examine each one in turn. And again, you know, you can have some incubation units. You want to make sure your market research is done really, really well. As you know, it goes back to your strategic relevance. But again, is there actually a demand for the product? What's the consumer benefit, the customer benefit, the supporter benefit in a football club from actually having that idea and taking it forward? And I think then you can start to get a little bit of, you know, prioritize the ones that are really, really, you know, that you want to run with. So I've actually got a model that I've used, because I found in football, as you just sort of articulated at the start, that you get so many ideas thrown at you, so much positivity, lots of you know people coming into the business as well who want to reshape football, and that's not just your colleagues, it's also your owners as well. So you have to make sure that you know, you're focusing on the right areas to go forward. I learned the process at BAS, and it's something I've been able to take forward into football. More than happy to share that if you know, with the chamber, if the one that I use, just a simple one pager, just to help me make that work.
No, I think that would be very useful, Andrew. I'd be fascinated, looking forward to receiving to reading your article on how you innovated and demonstrated that creativity through the pandemic at MK Dons, and perhaps what lessons you've taken from that into Pompey in the seasons to come. I'd certainly be reading that article if you did write one. So for sure. We're coming to the end of the session, last 10 minutes or so. I'd like just to invite our panelists just to sort of summarize before we formally close. So Brett, would you like to do that for us?
Could you repeat the question again, please, Rob? Sorry, chap.
Yeah, sorry. Just to give us a quick summary of everything we discussed today and things, perhaps specifics that we could pick up and run with post-session.
Yeah, I think that it's leveraging. It's all about leveraging the people at your network. Your network includes the all the different services that are available to people. Utilizing the hints and tips that have been discussed on here, the experiences that people have got. I'm sure there's lots of different people here that have not met each other, utilize their network and move forward in a positive way to ensure that not only do you as a business actually provide a great service to your customers, but also not be afraid of trying new things and going out into the marketplace, and don't be using an old, quite an old phrase now, don't be afraid of failing.
Yes, no, wise words indeed, Brett. And Craig, some of your wisdom as we end the session.
Yeah, I think I know I've said it several times, but reiterate this idea that I talked about before, which is constantly thinking about that alignment between the needs of the business and individuals, and especially as we move forward and try to understand how hybrid working is really going to work, because I think this is going to take years for us to figure out the right way to work. I've heard, and more increasingly I'm hearing stories from people talking about how their employer has said, right, we want you back in the office 3 days a week and you're going to get 2 days working from home. Isn't that great? And they're going, well, wait a minute, my friends over here get to work at home whenever they want. So as leaders, we have to think about, okay, what makes sense for us as a business, but what do the employees need? And I think that also leads on to the idea of skills that Pat talked about. So we also have a Kickstarter in our business, and being a tech business, most of our team were already quite used to remote working before the pandemic. But bringing the Kickstarter in, it's clear that wasn't a skill that has been necessarily developed through their time in education and university. So we found that something particularly challenging that we've tried to understand and think more about how we support that individual. And I think the last thing I'll just say, the last point I make is about picking up on what Andrew was talking about ideas and how you deal with them. Interesting, in a business I've worked in the past, we set up a one-page that essentially what we were trying to do is there were so many ideas coming in. What we found is that you really needed to get someone to own an idea, because people will throw ideas at you all the time. And actually we used this idea of a one-pager, and there were some simple sections in it. And when someone came up with an idea, it's like, go and fill this in. And that demonstrated an initial level of commitment that he really believed in this idea. They'd have to go and do some investigation before submitting that back to the team. But then again, and this is maybe picking up a bit on what Brett was just saying, it's about, if you really believe in that idea, how can you test it with the minimal amount of investment? What can you do? Who can you go and talk to see whether there are really legs in this idea? And for us as a tech company, maybe it's a little bit easier because we can mock up ideas of what a new product or interface might look like. But there are all sorts of ways you can test ideas before you invest too much in them.
Yeah, very good, Craig. Very good practical advice. Andrew, the same question to you, really. Your key summaries and practical things that our audience could take away with them.
Yeah, I think the key thing for me is that we all thrive on, customer confidence and the links we have with our customers, the engagement we have with it. And the pandemic has, in a number of different businesses, customers will now be thinking differently about the way that they either consume, purchase, or engage with your product. It's no different in football. And so we've got to understand that, we've got to learn, we've got to listen, and we've got to be in a position where we get our research right, but most importantly, our delivery is a confident one. And in football, that's really important, as for us, it manifests itself in people coming back into the stadium, but also the different ways that we have connected with people over the last 16 months have been a little bit different. We have used forums such as this, and it's meant that we can use these for to perhaps engage more people than we might normally have been by inviting them into a building or into a stadium to talk to us. I still prefer the sort of meeting people where I can, because I think it gives you the opportunity to build more two-way engagement, which is a bit more difficult on Zoom or Microsoft Teams to actually do that, because it tends to, it's difficult to get people to come in. But there's a way of doing it, and I think that's really, really important. So yeah, that sort of focus on innovation is important, but more importantly, just listening and learning and not taking for granted that your customers and clients will behave in the same way as they did, before March 2020.
Great, Andrew, thank you. And thank you from me to our panelists. Wise, practical words there. I'll now hand over to Ross, who will close the session.
Thanks very much, Rob. Thank you for a brilliant session, everybody. Thank you, Brett, Craig, Andrew. The insights that you've provided and the support you've given to the Chamber and to the businesses in Portsmouth today are really welcome, and thanks so much for the efforts that I know you're putting in on behalf of the business community across Portsmouth as well. So please, stay engaged with everybody on this call, and any questions, queries, etc. that you have, please send them to me or send them to Tom, and I'll make sure that Brett and Craig and Andrew are in a position to be able to engage with you around those if there are any follow-up issues or follow-up opportunities. I think one of the interesting things that we've learned today is that remote isn't really remote at all. It's very close. I mean, it's close in terms of the way it's coming towards us, but it's also the way in which we operate together. It seems closer than when we were sometimes sharing offices. We can walk into environments and say a few things to each other and get on with our job, and have colleagues that we engage with and colleagues that we don't. But actually, the new way of working, I think, brings us closer together in that we find channels and needs and responsibility for engaging everybody across our teams. And I think that actually will turn out to be a far closer relationship with the people that we work with than we had before. It's an irony, I think, of remote working. We've had a sort of what I called a business speak bingo at the start of this, where I said that we've been challenged with new words and new thinkings and ways, as I think Craig said, of creating great urgency to having to change the way we operate. But when we have dug down in this session, we've started to see other words coming through, which I think have more traction. We talked about ideas. We've talked about our community and innovation, and creating urgency and removing fear of failure. I'm looking at you, England. We're talking about the next generation and flexibility and trust and next generation skills. And all of those are very positive, and I might say supportive ways of developing our business, but creating common ownership, creating real collaboration with our stakeholders. And our stakeholders include and start with all the people that we employ within our organizations, and then our client base, and then all of our partners. And that collaboration piece, I think, comes through with the kind of language that we've heard today, and the very supportive way that we've shown that businesses will have to find new ways of collaborating as we move forward. So I have a very positive and optimistic outlook that these challenges that we've had over the last 18 months have, yes, allowed us to make the decisions that we were going to make anyway, have accelerated that decision making, but has grounded them in a way that is built out of our community and out of the people that we are close to. And I think that's going to be the added value. So this has been a fantastic session, and it's all about Portsmouth Business Week. And please do take a look at Hampshire Chamber's website, and you'll see all of the details of all of the events that are taking place. Book yourself onto other events across the week, and hopefully that they really help your business to think in new ways and achieve new objectives. Thank you so much for participating today, and see you at the next session. Rob.
Thank you, Ross. The very best of luck. Hope to see you all again soon, and have a great rest of the week. And come on, England. Sorry, Ross. Tomorrow evening. If the panel and team could stay on just for a quick